Hello, my name is Captain Dan Hanley, and I currently serve as the Director and International Public Spokesperson for a global grassroots effort called 9/11 Pilot Whistleblowers, whose purpose is to show that there were no Muslim hijackers at the controls of the 9/11 aircraft, but that the aircraft were electronically hijacked through employment of a system called the uninterruptible autopilot that enables a remote source to take complete control of the aircraft autopilot and flight management computers and fly it to its target. Once this system is engaged, the pilots cannot disconnect it. We have a website at 911pilot.org and a YouTube channel at 911 Pilots if you would like additional information on our organization or this system. I commenced flying over 50 years ago, and over a career span of 35 years, I accrued 20,000 flight hours in 15 different aircraft. And I can unequivocally say without embarrassment or reservation that I could not have flown the 9/11 flight profiles, and neither could the alleged Muslim hijackers. Now, normally on our interviews here, we've been recruiting and interviewing highly experienced both active and retired military and civilian pilots, but we're going to jump to the other end of the spectrum today and interview a gentleman who has comparable time to that of the hijackers, and we would like to welcome him right now. I have with me Emanuel Lile. He's formerly from Romania, but lives in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Welcome, Emanuel.
Thank you, Dan.
Okay, rather than me going to a lengthy introduction of you, I'm going to let you do it yourself. Could you just tell us what year you commenced flying and how many years
Certainly.
experience you have?
Yes. So as you said, I'm originally from Romania. I'm a naturalized citizen here now, and hold an FAA single engine land private pilot license, as well as the FAA ground instructor basic and instrument ratings. And I started flying at age 18, and off and on, because my dream was to one day be an airline captain just like you, but life happened and we didn't get there. However, off and on over the years, I'm 42 now, so that's quite a few years. I started and had to stop and restarted again and so on. I've accumulated about 135 hours total time in various small single engine aircraft. About a year ago, I started transitioning to TAA, so technically advanced aircraft in the technical sense per the FAA definition, which essentially involves a glass cockpit. So far, my experience also comprises 337 landings and about 39.7 hours of instrument time, both actual and simulated. And in addition to that, I have about 16 and a half hours in full motion simulators, as I am still preparing to earn the commercial license as well as the instrument rating, getting very close to that. So you might say that my flight experience and licensing is relatively similar to that of the alleged hijackers on 9/11.
Yes, and it extends over a much greater period of time than they did. I mean, they arrived in the States. Muhammad Atta and Marvin Al-Shay arrived in the States like 15 months prior to 9/11, I believe, and Hani Hanjour arrived about a year prior. So that's the extent of their flight experience. And you're right, you do have comparable experience. So you wouldn't exactly qualify as an expert witness in a court of law, or well, from the vantage point of being an inexperienced pilot, you would qualify because you do have a lot to offer in terms of testimony. If you were called to testify before a grand jury in a federal court of law and attest to what you're about to say, would you do so? Would you be willing to do that?
Absolutely.
Okay, that's great. Let me describe the Pentagon profile for people that aren't familiar with what exactly happened now. Hani Hanjour, a 29-year-old Saudi Arabian hijacker, First, let me explain that he arrived in the States in the mid-90s, took some flight training, and went back to Saudi Arabia. And he was a very poor student during that time, so much so that when he returned to the United States in the year 2000, flight tech, jet tech flight school in Arizona wouldn't even take him back because he was such a poor student the first time there. They didn't want to waste assets on him. So he did take additional flight training during this period of time, but he flew American 77 supposedly that departed Dulles Airport heading for the West Coast. And when the aircraft arrived at cruising flight level, it did a U-turn and started a descent back in towards Washington, D.C. And just west of the Pentagon, the aircraft commenced a corkscrew 330-degree turn, accelerating turn to arrive precisely at ground level to strike the Office of Naval Intelligence at 500 knots, which is over 500 miles an hour, without skidding the surface and on his first attempt. Now, this exact maneuver was replicated in a simulator by highly experienced pilots, and almost without exception, they crashed the simulator every time they attempted this maneuver. And yet we've been led to believe that Hani Hanjour accomplished this amazing aerial feat on his first attempt. Now, first of all, do you believe that he could have flown the flight profile, Emanuel? And if not, why not? And please go into detail as far as describing requisite skills necessary to accomplish it.
Thank you. I absolutely do not believe he could have possibly flown that flight profile. And if you'll allow me, I'll pick apart some of the main points as to why I don't believe that someone with my skill, which is comparable, if not better than his, really, because I've actually maintained interest in this time and again, could not possibly fly that profile. So according to the 9/11 Commission report, and I should also clarify, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, right? I took interest in this stuff simply because it's aviation related, and the numbers and the allegations just make absolutely no sense to me as a pilot. I don't have a horse in this race, so to speak, politically or any of that other stuff that people do. But anyway, according to the 9/11 Commission report, just as you described, when this aircraft commenced the final phase of their attack, they were located 5 miles from the Pentagon and at about 7,000 feet. We are then expected to believe that this inexperienced pilot who had zero heavy jet time, zero whatsoever, executes a 330-degree turn, a descending turn, rolls out on the exact, correct, precise heading, allegedly close to 500 knots, right? Because we don't have a whole lot of room to work with within that 5 miles. And then accelerates to 500 knots, give or take, and hits a building that's 77 feet above the ground and somehow compensates for wind and ground effect and hits the building. That is unconscionable to me. First of all visual maneuvers, as you know, ground reference ones especially, can be disorienting, and we wouldn't really ever do any kind of maneuvers like that at our level. I mean, you do something somewhat similar for commercial training, but not like that, nothing like that, I would say. So I just can't understand how this kind of extraordinary precision with absolutely zero room for error could possibly be accomplished by someone like Hanjour. It's impossible. Moreover, I'm also troubled by the just some of the basic aerodynamic implications of this narrative, because I just don't understand how you could accelerate and maintain control of a jet at near sea level, right? The elevation is not very great there at Pentagon. at 500 knots and not have parts getting ripped off the plane, losing control because of aerodynamic flutter.
Well, if I could just interject something there,
Sure.
you're exactly correct. According to aircraft structural engineers, the speed of 500 knots exceeds the maximum operating speed of a 757 at sea level by about 120 to 140 knots. And they claim that it should have come apart, or pieces should have come off the airplane, which did not happen. So that leaves a lot of explaining for the U.S. government to do in that regard. Go ahead, Emanuel. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to throw that in there.
Oh, not at all. I think you make a great point. So let's assume that let's assume that he started this descending turn at speeds that were more akin to what we fly at my level, right? So
Right.
let's say he was able to hand fly at about, I don't know, 145 knots, which is give or take the approach speed for that jet from my extensive reading on this and talking with some pilots who have flown heavy jets, right? So obviously it's not always exactly the same because of pressure, air pressure, and the total weight of the aircraft at the moment and all of that. But let's assume it was around 145. So we're expected to believe that this particular pilot, who again has never flown a heavy jet, can hand fly a constant speed descending turn, 330-degree turn, I might add, roll out on the exact correct heading for this building, and somehow still have enough time upon reaching 2200 to then spool up within a half a mile from what should have been close to idle. But let's assume he was at half power. The spool up time, and I counted this watching countless videos of spool ups from idle to full throttle of these Rolls-Royce RB211s, which is what a lot of these 57s had on them. The full spool up time is about 15 seconds. So let's assume he was at half power already when he came out of that turn. That still leaves him with 7 seconds of spool up time to accelerate the aircraft from 145 knots to 500 knots in about a half a mile. That is physically impossible, cannot happen.
Right.
It's just, not to mention that to execute that kind of a constant speed descending turn, he would have had to have some pretty good practice with deploying flaps, at a minimum deploying flaps, and knowing how to control, right?
He wouldn't be deploying flaps in that case, Emmanuel. He would be using a speed brake that the aircraft has on, because the speeds that they're accelerating to would exceed the flap extension speeds allowable.
I just mean in the descent. Assuming okay. that he started a constant speed slow flight descent like that from 7,000 to 2,200 at 145 knots, right? Okay. You would very likely extend the flaps and need quite a bit of power, right? So let's say at least 50% power. I'm just guesstimating here because again, I've never flown something that big.
Uh-huh.
And then we're expected to believe that he could recover from that on the exact correct heading and somehow accelerate within a half a mile, right? Retract the flaps fully to achieve 500 knots. That's a preposterous idea.
I agree. And let me ask you, I think you've already answered this question, but could you have performed the maneuver yourself?
Absolutely not.
Yes.
In fact, okay. I don't believe any human being can perform that maneuver from that aircraft.
Well, I think that the simulated replication of the event and showing that experienced pilots crashed, it answers that question as well. So how familiar are you with the instrumentation on commercial jet aircraft, the advanced ones with the electronic flight instrument display system?
I would say I have maybe a minimal basic understanding. Just because I have transitioned to a glass cockpit in these small planes, and you still have some of the fundamental gauges, right? You have a steam gauge redundancy, but it is an overwhelming cockpit. And I cannot for 1 second accept the theory that someone could just walk into that cockpit and execute high precision maneuvers like that on their first try. Far more systems there to know and understand that you cannot get wrong. There is no such thing as room for error in something that big.
I agree with you. On our website, 911pilots.org, we do a photo comparison of the two cockpits, and it's a day and night difference.
Yes, I saw that.
And for them to jump in a cockpit and be able to interpret those instruments, the engine instruments, but most importantly, the flight management computer and its input device, the control display units, is absurd. It's laughable. And we honestly believe that the reason so many people fell for the official story is, one, the government told them that this was what happened. Two, the media still perpetuates the story that this is what happened. And three, they're not pilots, and they cannot conceive of the absurdity of the ludicrous notion that these pilots flew the aircraft because they've never been exposed to the cockpit environment or flown an airplane themselves. So,
right.
Now, given we're not going to go to the Pentagon crashes, and we could, because the World Trade Center crashes, because the Pentagon crash and Hani Hanjour is a smoking gun in all of this. But given that 3 airplanes did supposedly strike 3 buildings that day, and we have both agreed that the hijackers could not have flown these aircraft, can you come up with a viable alternative explanation as to how the crashes did occur?
I mean, this is just a theory. The only explanation that would be plausible in my mind is some kind of expert computer controlled or machine controlled flying of these flight profiles, because the precision involved there, and those are by and large aerobatic maneuvers within the FAA's definition, right?
Right.
Those were not maneuvers required for normal flight. Therefore, they would be aerobatic. These guys couldn't even fly regular planes in non-aerobatic situations. So much so that Hanjour was actually denied rental of a 172.
Right.
The idea is preposterous. So yeah. it would have had to have been some kind of I think your theory, I should say, makes perfect sense, right? Which for years this theory was not really around. So I was perplexed about what else could have happened there, right?
That's what that's what we offer the public. We say, did the inexperienced pilots actually come in, control the aircraft that day, or was it the uninterruptible autopilot? And people need to understand that the advanced navigation system on today's modern commercial jet aircraft is actually derived from cruise missile technology and is extremely accurate, as is evidence on auto landings when the weather is inclement. But
if I could interject.
Sure.
Because you brought up navigation, I also, just again, from a sheer aviation standpoint, I don't understand how we're expected to believe that people with their level of experience and their basically lack of proficiency, even on the basic planes that we fly at our level, could possibly have navigated these aircraft from their takeoff, from their departure locations, right, at Boston and then at Washington, respectively, and found these targets basically visually at these amazing speeds. Not to mention the difficulties that would be involved with properly descending, right? I believe 77 had actually climbed to flight level 250 or something like that, maybe higher.
It climbed to cruise altitude.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
To prevent overspeed conditions and things like that. I just don't understand how that could have been done by these people. So it just makes no sense.
So you consider the uninterruptible autopilot a viable alternative explanation as to how it happened that day?
Absolutely. It's the only explanation that makes sense.
Right. I agree. And why, the reason that we're doing this, folks, is because there's never been a criminal investigation into 9/11. The 9/11 Commission didn't constitute a criminal investigation. And not one single pilot, it should be pointed out, was permitted to testify before the 9/11 Commission as to how absurd their official story was. And we want our turn in court to present our evidence before the public and in a court to conclude, so that hopefully we can indict some people and put them in prison for these crimes against humanity. Do you have any other closing comments you'd like to make, Emanuel?
Well, yes. I think it's important to understand for your viewers that were not for the chilling revelations that came from the leaks and the eventual declassification of the insane Operation Northwoods, I would have never believed that the government of what is probably the only remaining superpower in the world today would ever conceive of killing their own citizens in cold blood to blame it on someone else, right? The so-called false flag attack. That is precisely what Operation Northwoods envisioned. And these were not criminal thugs, right, from some gang in New York streets. These were military officers, very highly placed, with access to very, very deadly weapons. And so if this was ever thought of once, maybe more, but at least ones that we know of for sure now, it's chilling to think this, but I could see how elements in the government could have totally done something like this with 9/11. Up until I read your theory, I just could not understand how they could have pulled that off, because clearly human pilots, especially these guys, no way they could have done these flight profiles.
Right. Well, I would encourage people to go to 911pilots.org, and at the top of the page is a drop-down menu. And you can go down and read. We do an aircraft comparison, a cockpit comparison. We talk about the hijackers, but most importantly, we talk about this remote control system, because so few people are aware of the fact that over 75 years ago, U.S. military was remotely controlling aircraft. And we've got excellent videos on the website that you should watch. And then also the pilot interviews we've conducted, who other pilots have chimed in and said exactly what Emanuel is saying here, that these pilots couldn't have flown the aircraft. And I might add that if you are a pilot out there and you wish to be interviewed, just go to our website, and at the top of the page there's a Join Us tab. Click on that, and all we need is your name and your email address, and there's a comments box there that you indicate what type of aircraft you've flown, and we'll get in touch with you. And it's a simple interview, as you see here, the questions we ask, and we'd appreciate any cooperation we can get from any pilots out there, because had sufficient number of pilots spoken out after 9/11 and said this is an impossible feat these hijackers supposedly performed, perhaps we would have had a different outcome in the aftermath of 9/11, and we wouldn't have had all the illegal and unwarranted invasion of foreign countries in the Middle East and South Asia. So thank you for taking the time to be interviewed, Emanuel Lile. And thank you, folks, for taking the time to watch this. Until next time, this is Captain Dan Hanley and Emanuel Lile signing off and saying so long.
Thank you.